My favorite story from What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky is War Stories. We follow the main character, Nwando, after she gets in a fight at school with one of her classmates. Her classmate was trying to make fun of people or other classmates who didn't have a bra, and she had a club where if you had a padded bra, you were invited. And Nwando didn't believe that she even had a bra, so she ripped open her shirt and embarrassed her in front of the whole class. Her mother got called in. Her mother was very mad at her and told her, when we get home, your dad is going to have a talk with you. And so when she gets home, she's anticipating this big talk with her dad. And so they go over and they play chess on a chessboard. And her dad slowly starts getting into his stance whenever he tells a war story. And so she gets ready for that. And then her dad starts telling a story he'd already told before. He starts talking about a lieutenant that he was under when he was 12 years old. And when he says that, she's shocked. She's like, you were in the army when you were 12? And he continues and he talks about how the lieutenant was strict and all the other boys in his platoon were always made to keep up themselves, keep up their weapon, keep, in shape for the military. And you were always supposed to have your gun by your side. And one day, the lieutenant stole his gun, and he didn't know. And what he did as a 12-year-old boy is he would rotate out with his other platoon members and just use their gun whenever a check would come. And it worked for a good week. And then one day, the lieutenant called them all together, and he didn't have his gun, and he told him, like, where's your gun? And so he was called out. And at the very end of the story, he says, I was whipped so hard, my back looked like pureed tomatoes, and they buried me in the sand. And that's how it ends. And that's how it ends for her as well. And it completely just chops the tension and just lays it out in front of her. A 12-year-old girl hears about the pain that her father had to go through as a 12-year-old boy. And it kind of juxtaposes her violence, which is completely needless, over a petty fight that she had with her friend next to his, which is horrible but necessary for a 12-year-old boy to understand that he needs to be an adult to fight this war that he has no part in, which is the Biafran War. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I really thought that was a very powerful part, and I love the way that she wrote it, because when I was reading him tell his story, I was going along with it, and I was like, okay, this is a good story, and then when it got to that part, it just snaps you back awake. You're like, I wasn't ready for that. And we go through the cycle again where she's at school and she's gained sort of a following of people who liked that she had, beaten that other girl down, and now that she's the new ringleader, and she has this sort of, what would you call it, like a court, like where she judges people, and a girl's brought up to her, and the one who brings her up says she lied about what job her brother had. Arbitrary, meaningless thing, but she's there to judge her. And she's not even really hearing the girl talk, but she has a flashback of her uncle Emmanuel, because the girl's brother happens to be Emmanuel. And out of rage, she punches this girl very, very hard, and I think she's younger than her. And so again, she's in trouble for something that she really can't control, and all of her constituents turn against her because it was just uncalled for. Like, you cannot be violent like that. And that's what her father was, I think that's what her father was trying to tell her, that she was being needlessly violent in a world where it will come to you no matter what. And she did it again. And so this time when her mother picks her up, she's silent. She's just completely, not given up, but she sees how the situation is turning. And when she gets home, her dad is the same way. And he starts another story. And this one's a little different. So he starts and he tells about his friend in the army who would kill snakes. So he would get their heads and shoot them with his gun. It was easy to do because it had a little space to put the head. And he would fry them up every night. And he would always laugh because the dad was scared. And he was like, oh, don't do that. And his friend would be like, what? It's easy. Like, this is fun. And he would, have food. And then one day, the lieutenant came into the barracks to get his friend. And he said, look at all these people. And there was, like, half the village standing outside. And he was like, they want you because you've been killing their gods every night. And so he was like, I'm not going to give you to them right now, but I will if you do this again. You're being incredibly disrespectful, basically, is what he was saying. And, again, he continues and he says, all of the people were standing next to a snake, like a big group of them, and they just weren't doing anything. They were just staring at it. And then all of a sudden, a little boy with a stick goes over to it and starts poking at it. And his mom screams at him, like, stop, come back, like, don't do that. But he doesn't listen to her as, like, little kids would do. Just connecting. And then immediately he gets wrapped up by the snake and it kills him. And then he ends it by saying it took 4 days for the snake to die and for us to bury that little boy. So again, it ends horribly. I mean, that's a horrible story, obviously. And so his last story is a cautionary tale of, you don't listen to me, this is what happens, and also just not understanding what you're doing, just doing things because you can and not thinking about them, it has consequences. I think that's what he was doing as well. But, anyway, her mom hears the entire thing and she takes her away and then tells her a sweet story about all these termites eating this sap. And basically, the story was just meant to wash away that traumatizing, honestly, story that her father had just told her. And not traumatizing in a sense of like, oh, that's going to scar her forever, but it's just, it shook her. And it should have, because, I mean, like I said, you shouldn't be using violence like that, because doesn't show that you're smart enough to deal with your problems a different way. Anyway, how I connected to that is my dad, when I was younger, I wouldn't fight, but I don't remember if I stole or I would chirp back at my teachers or like other kids at school. And I have a very privileged upbringing compared to my dad. He was born in South Texas, and he's mixed Mexican and white. And so Mexicans see him as white, and white people see him as Mexican. It's the worst of both worlds, as I used to say. And so he had to fight a lot. And when I was younger and I would argue with him about, like, no, this is why it makes sense to why I did this, he would do something similar to me, and he would tell me about, like, some horrible things that he had to do when he fought people. And whether this is right or this is wrong of him to do this, it would shake me, and I would think, my father, it would put my entire life in perspective. Like, my father was a kid like me, and he had to do these things, and I'm not being placed anywhere near that type of world. And the problems that I'm dealing with, I should be putting them in a different perspective. And I do appreciate that. I think that was really smart of him to do, honestly. But it was crazy to me that I picked that one, because I read the first one and then this one. It was kind of chosen by random, but I related to it so much because my dad used to do the same thing. And I think it did shape who I am, and I think it was a good thing to do, because now I can see that my little bubble of who I am is not the only experience in the world. and that happened. He gave me that perspective when I was younger, and I think that's what the dad's trying to do, but because his trauma is so large and because he's been through so much, like it says, like, he lets too much out. He tells her, like, he forgets where the story ends. I think that was a line in the book. And so I just thought that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed that one. I reread it like 3 times because I just wanted to make sure I got all of it. So there we go.